Hajime!
Hello, Legionaries. This is General Lance, and today I have a special treat for you. I have an individual who is immersed in the murky world of PMCs, who is a combat veteran and a very interesting guy. This individual's name is American Militant, and I'm really happy to have him on. How are you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I can't wait to actually have you on, dude. Like, I've actually been a fan of your channel for a little bit, and I'm happy that you actually reached out, and it's kind of all came together last minute there, so it's pretty great.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Anyway, so I wanted to kind of ask you a couple questions, and I think a lot of people, especially in a general cultural sphere, in like the military, they think that, like, you know, contracting is like 13 hours where, like, you know, you have ex-Navy SEALs doing like high-speed shit where, you know, they're assassinating people and et cetera, which I'm sure they do. But, you know, obviously there's the other side of it too, which is the security, which is the, you know, positioning of like paramilitary forces in locations where U.S. military forces are like not exactly the best employment of force. And obviously the UN has passed a resolution since World War II about, you know, mercenaries, etc. So now it's called private military contracting, which is, I think, is better because it's like the Italian condottieri, you know, the contractors, you know. But I kind of wanted to ask you, what's your background? You know, where do you come from, and how is it that you got into the military world in general?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the way I grew up is going to be fairly typical of a lot of your audience, except I grew up on the left coast in a very liberal state, but
Good
kind of grew up
God.
in the middle of, yeah. It was not fun. Kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere though, a very rural town. Mom and dad homeschooled me. They homeschooled all of my siblings and I after they were very unimpressed with how my sisters were doing in the school system. And while I certainly can't describe my dad as, you know, based or far right or anything like that, it sticks out in my mind that that, you know, the first lessons about, you know, United States history / like federal government was my father telling me about like Ruby Ridge and like Waco and stuff like that, which settled me on the path of, you know, the right wing, which is almost universal in the infantry and private military contracting. But you know, aside from being homeschooled, had a fairly standard childhood. You know, grew up, went to church, had a large group of friends that, you know, always kind of did things on the weekend, and rolled around to about senior year of high school. And it's common within some homeschooling groups to where kids go and take some college classes around that time. And it's not because they're super smart or anything. It's just because, you know, homeschooling naturally lends itself to college, I've found. And like most guys that wind up in my shoes, you know, those first classes went fine, and then going to, you know, a local community college full time, and you know, the classes that I like, the classes I enjoyed, easy to study for. Mm-hmm. Classes that I didn't, dude, I couldn't study worth a damn. You could not get me to sit down and study math.
Yeah.
And
No, I had a similar experience too. I mean, being in the military or like wanting to get a commission, you had to get a degree, right? So I got a solid George Bush GPA, 2.5. So shout out to that. Yeah. But yeah, I hear you, brothers. And so what made you transition from college, I assume, to the military?
Yeah. So, as time is going on and, and GPA is not what I want. And, driving fucking 30 minutes back and forth. All my friends are off at all these crazy colleges. The military is, trickling in the back of my mind because, my family has a history of service. Father was in the Guard for 20 years, infantry. One of my mother's brothers was a Marine. What was he? I think he was small boat. Back when the Marine Corps still had like the small boat units, he was a small boat. One of my grandfathers jumped into Normandy, but he didn't keep any of his shit, and he was older when he did it. He wasn't 19, so Alzheimer's kind of took him out before the grandkids could get a lot of detail. So it's always there in the back of my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And living at home, 'cause it's a small community college, doesn't even have a whole lot of dorms, at least didn't back then, and not really a whole lot going on. And I figured, what, I'll try the Army.
Right.
Worst case scenario, I'll run around the woods, for 3 years, save some money, get the GI Bill, and then see what happens afterwards. So
they don't do the standard four-year contracts anymore?
No, Army fluctuates its contracts quite a bit. Some are 4-year, 5-year, depending on what MOS or job you get. The standard is 3 with 5 years in the IRR, but they changed it so much. When I was getting out, we had dudes coming in on 2-year active duty contracts.
Really?
Yeah, which blew our mind. But so wound up talking with a recruiter, and everything goes pretty well. I score pretty well on the ASVAB. I think I got like a 92. And it comes time to pick the jobs, and I was like, oh well, I'll just pick infantry. My recruiter was a little bit of a rockhead. He's like, oh well, we don't have infantry available. I have to refresh this page, and then all the jobs that we have show up on this list. It's like, oh, you could be like an armor mechanic. Oh, never mind. I shit you not. The exact quote's like, oh, you could be an armor mechanic. Oh, never mind. Someone grabbed that job.
What?
Wow. I'm like, what the hell? And so another job comes up. He's like, oh well, this is a laser designation repair technician with an airborne kicker. You could get. Oh nope, that job's gone too. and so he starts looking at these jobs that are kind of hanging out a little bit. Keep in mind, all of this is over 5 minutes, right? We're sitting at a fucking desk in his office,
right?
And a chaplain's assistant comes up, and it kind of stays there for a little bit. And he's, oh, watch the promotional video on chaplain's assistant. And they market that thing like you're the bodyguard for the chaplain. Like that's what you do. You're bodyguarding the chaplain. And growing up and going to church, that wasn't a totally offensive idea to me. I was like, yeah, well, I guess I'll do that. I was like, all right, sweet. And he puts everything in, and he's like, all right, man. Yeah. Next time I get in contact with you, it'll be to let you know when, when I think you're going to be out and head you off to basic training.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, okay. And I'm driving back and thinking of my dad, thinking of my uncle, my grandfather. I was like, I don't want to be a fucking chaplain's assistant. There's only there's only one reason to join the military. It's to be the infantry. Right. Everyone else, they're fighting for best supporting actor, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So I get home. I call the recruiter up. I'm like, hey man, listen, I appreciate all the help you did. Let me know when you have an infantry contract, and I'll be all over that. He's like, "Oh man, this is gonna mess this is gonna mess your ship out date up, yada yada." I'm like, "Yeah, listen, dude, I get it, but I got a family history of guys being in the infantry. I can't be the one to break it."
Yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 days later, that dude's sergeant major. I don't know why the fucking sergeant major called. Right? "Oh, what's this I hear about the chaplain's assistant not being a good job in the army?" I remember he'll go, "Well, hey, Sergeant Major," because I have no idea why the fuck this dude's calling me. "Well, any job's a good job in the army. The infantry is just, what I want to measure myself by. I'll see what I can do." And he fucking hangs up. And like an hour later, he calls me. He's like, "All right, we have you a contract, but we had to take it from someone," which is bullshit.
Yeah, of course.
He's like, and so it was a 3-year contract. Standard, went to basic training like a couple weeks later, back when basic training still wasn't totally a soft-footed fucking mess. Women in the infantry weren't even a fucking worry, getting screamed at, getting sweared at, getting the shit smoked out of you. Got out, joined my unit. Great unit. Somehow that unit, my battalion, missed the 2 deployments that my brigade went on. And in between those deployments, my battalion got a deployment to Afghanistan. And everyone's fucking excited, finally we get our fucking chance to go. And I remember our company commander calling all of us into the fucking day room. He's like, "All right, guys, I got good news, I got bad news. The good news is the battalion is deploying. I can confirm that. The bad news is a company has to stay behind," which was us.
No.
Oh, we were furious. The young guys were furious. Like the squad leaders and the platoon sergeants and up kind of knew what the deployment was supposed to be, which was Guardian Angel missions out of Bagram, which is just shit. No one's really doing that shit. So the older guys were happy that they got to, not cool their heels for 9 months in Bagram and stay with their families. And the younger guys were all fucking up in arms until like their buddies in other companies were like, "Dude, this shit fucking sucks. We got like a PT test every month, we gotta wear all this stupid shit." And we were enjoying 4 days and block leave and shit like that.
So it was pretty skate. That's what it sounds like.
Oh yeah, 100%. We had like I said, I had an awesome experience in the Army. I had awesome first sergeants, awesome company commanders. My lieutenants across the board were fucking outstanding. I had an amazing platoon sergeant. I had a battalion sergeant major that was hilarious. My battalion commander was prior Delta Force.
Wow.
Which is a fucking trip. If you look up photos of Black Hawk Down and shit, you can see him in some of the photos where there's Delta Force.
Dude, that's insane.
So all of that translated into a very laid-back battalion commander. Like our gear policy, right? And the guys who have served will understand this. Our gear policy was wear whatever you want, no stupid colors. And if I catch you and it looks weird, you have to prove to me that it works. And that was it. That was all there was, which was huge.
Dude,
so, had a great time, but wanted to do something else, right? Not really a whole lot of deployments on the horizon. No one's really fighting anymore. At best, there's a slightly above average risk about getting a leg blown off on an IED, but nothing really insane. And and stuck in the barracks, which the barracks is great, and at the same time it's fucking atrocious.
Right.
So did my 3, got out, kind of wondering what to do next. I had a friend in my platoon who guy was a little bit of a guru. right? Not a bad dude, but, kind of portly, kind of short, always talk about like, yeah, I'm going to go to selection. Yeah, I'm going to go to RASP, which is, Special Forces Selection and the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, where they select guys to go to Ranger Battalion. And he never did it, right? And so he gets out and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be like contracting. And everyone's like, dude, no the fuck you're not. You're going to go home. You're going to live in your mother's basement. You're going to go to school just like everyone else that does when they fucking get out of this fucking shithole.
Right, yeah.
And dude, I shit you not, fucking 4 months later, we all get thrown in this group chat with this dude, a little stupid operator mustache. He's like, I'm on the way to Dubai. I'm contracting. Fuck you guys. And then he never responded to any of our questions or anything like that, which was fucking hilarious. But so fast forward a couple months, I get out and I hit him up. I'm like, dude, like, what does it take to start contracting? Because, for your listeners, contracting is this mythical thing in the military where you make like $1,000 a day, but you need to know like 3 people, you need to be a Green Beret or a Ranger, and it's just living the life of sex and danger, just doing cool shit all the time. And my buddy, calls me up. He's like, listen, it's a lot easier than I thought. You literally just apply on their websites. And I was like, what fucking websites? And he sends me a link to about a medium to large sized contracting company. And I trust the process, and I go and look for jobs in Afghanistan, and armed guard level 2. We're looking for people, and I look, and there's no requirements aside from a stint in the military under combat arms with an honorable discharge, and a few other small things that I'm fortunate enough to have. And I applied, and over the next couple months, I was in contact with the company. They flew me out to their location and did a train up that was about a week, which was easy. Didn't even have a PT test. Had a rifle qual, pistol qual, which was no problem. And then about a week later, they flew us down to Fort Hood, where we went through the Army's in processing, and 2 weeks later, I was in Afghanistan at Fort Bagram, just chilling, fucking being a security guard.
Holy shit. And so, like, for those of us that don't know, and obviously, like, I don't know if you heard this, but apparently today, it was announced that today is the last day of GWAT. Did you know that?
I did not. Fucking, It's finally over, huh?
Yeah, for real. So apparently the boys enlisting after today, they're not going to get their ketchup stain. So it's whatever. But just, there's a lot of, I don't know if you've watched like, movies like War Dogs and contracting movies like 13 Hours, etc. It gives the impression that contractors are often like super high speed, doing like, assassination missions and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that the majority of a war effort is, especially since GWAT, since 2001, has been like leaning on people like Eric Prince, providing pretty like quote unquote mundane comparatively manpower and stuff. And it still seems like you get paid a lot. I mean, mind if I ask how much were you paid for a contract like that?
Yeah, so I was essentially at like the entry level position for contracting. It was the type of job where, guys who weren't Rangers, guys who weren't Special Forces were doing to pad their resume, get a year of high threat time, which was just, living in Afghanistan or Iraq, all with the goal of getting bigger and better jobs. But even that, I was getting $210 every day, 6 days a week.
Holy shit.
And the nice thing about contracting is if you work for 330 days outside of the United States for a single fiscal year, you don't pay federal income tax.
Holy shit. Man,
So,
that's clutch. Holy shit, that's a lot of money. And from my understanding, they provide you with food and stuff, right?
yes. And obviously, you know, for guys in the military, you know, they'll understand this. You know, it's so easy to burn money on like food and stupid shit and yada yada yada. And thankfully, I've always kind of been good with money just by not spending it. And yeah, you know, the DFAC is there. That's a free meal. That's pretty damn good 4 times a day because they got midnight chow. You're living in these tiny little huts. I was living in picture like a big concrete cylinder, cut it in half, and then put that half just on the ground. And that's the type of building I was living in. And there was plywood rooms inside it, and you know, you're living essentially in a closet, so you can't buy a lot of shit. You know, never mind the fact that you have to ship it out. So it was very easy for people to just save all of their money. And like I said before, that's the lowest end of the spectrum. There's contracts where, like I know, WIPS, Worldwide Protective Services, which is through the State Department. Those guys average out at like $500 a day. If you're a medic, if you're a designated marksman, if you're an interpreter, you can get like $650 to $700 a day. And there's even other shit through the State Department. And when I say State Department, it's just the CIA. That's it's. There's another program I forget one of our guys got tapped for where and this is probably the closest it comes to the movies, where like you're a guard in a safe house, and they pick you based off of your demographics. Like they're not going to send like the 6'2" white guy to be like a guard for a safe house in like Ethiopia. And one of our friends got slighted for that, and that was starting at like $800 a day.
Damn. Holy shit. And I mean, it sounds like, you know, it's very variable and depends on who you work for. And it sounds like you're a subcontracted under the Army. Is that right?
Yes. So for my contract, I was employed. I was contracted by my contracting company. And my contracting company then turned around and offered the Guard Forces services to the Army. Because my contract was not under State Department. My contract was under JSOC in the Army. And
like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like everyone has their you know, contractors, whether it's the CIA or the military forces themselves, or hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the Department of Agriculture has contractors at this point. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because contractors kind of it's a catch-all term. You know, you can be a contractor, but you work as a fucking food service guy. You know, and that's something that the company Garter World does quite a bit. And like, you know, we had contractors from India that came over, and their entire job is clean up the base, clean up the little base that we're on. They go around to all the fucking latrines, they clean those. You know, they go to common areas, they clean those, and those guys make good fucking money. So yeah, so everyone has their fucking contractors because they need someone to do a job that they can't afford to have like a uniformed member of the DoD do. So my job specifically was, hey, you know, listen, you could be on 6 JSOC bases, which is Joint Special Operations Command, and your job is you're literally just a security guard. You man the towers, you man the gates, and you escort the other contractors around post when they're on, and then you escort them off. All because the only people that they could pass that job off to, if they didn't have any other units around, were like Rangers, because we had Rangers and Navy SEALs and Green Berets living on this base. And obviously, if your Rangers are going out every night or two on missions, which is what they were doing, it makes little sense to like have to carve off a huge chunk of that just to like check badges at the front gate, which is how we were able to get our job, because they needed so many people to check badges and do that shit. So I got to hang out with my buddies 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, and just check badges for Special Forces Command.
Wow, that's interesting. And do you mind if you take us through like a regular day, like just a regular fucking average Joe J of contracting where you're at?
Sure, absolutely. I'll give you the nitty gritty. My shifts were from 2 in the afternoon to 2 at night, which was huge. The other shift is fucking miserable because you got to get up at 2 in the morning every time. And you wake up and there's little to no privacy in the huts that we lived in, because there's no roofs on your little tiny rooms. So, you hear dudes farting, you hear dudes fucking swearing, you hear dudes fucking beating off, which I was never a fucking fan of. Get up around I'd get up around like 1:50. I'd get up 1:50, throw my shit on, which was boots, pants, top, vest, and backpack with like snacks and shit, because you couldn't have any electronics on post at all. And I'd stumble out the door, get to guard mount at like 1:53, because we live right next to our guard hut, and guard mount was essentially like all the guards get together for your shift. You get a brief on like what's going on, and you get your weapons. Guard mount was always super fucking quick, because our shift manager would be like, hey, nothing crazy, and then we'd line up, get our weapons, or it would take a little bit longer if something was on the radar. But most of the time we get told, hey, nothing crazy, file in, get our weapons, get our 6 magazines. And guys would go crazy, like buying these high-speed plate carriers and these fucking battle belts and this, that, the other thing. But, when you're a contractor, legally, you are not allowed to perform the role of the infantry. So you can fight to defend what you have to defend, but you can't attack. You can't take things. So, like, we always got told, like, if something crazy happens and they take a building, like the enemy scales over the walls and takes a building, our whole job is to contain them before, like, the army sends dudes to take it. So I just had a cheapo plate carrier with no belt, because I'm not going to be kicking in doors, so there's no reason for me to fucking have all this expensive gear. So load my shit up, get where I'm going to be, because there's a couple places you can be. There was front gate, which wasn't bad. That was you were checking badges at the front gate and operating the big metal pole across the road, so that vehicles can get in and out. Escorts, which was mint, because you just hung out at the front gate area, and every time a outside contractor came in, like food delivery, latrine cleaning, other shit, you just escort them around our little base. Towers, which was 2 guys to a tower, and they just sat in the tower all day, which was a pretty good gig, because those were always air conditioned and shit. But what everyone wanted was ramps, because ramps was what we called the 2 two-man positions that guarded the entrance to the Special Forces section of the airfield. And you're kind of off in the middle of nowhere. You can see people coming from a little whiles out, so you can just hang out there. But you get where you're working, and you head over there, or you catch a ride if you're going to ramps from your shift manager, and you just hang out for 12 hours straight. There's
and it sounds very like low pace. I guess you came in at the end of the intervention in Afghanistan. from what it sounds like, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so from, I guess, what I heard from my friends that were stationed like in similar places as you were, they're saying that there's really not much going on in a foreshadowing of events that happened. They're Afghanizing the war effort, right? Which was we saw how that ended up for Vietnam with the Vietnamization of the war, right? And so it's kind of the exact same things happened with the withdrawal from Kabul as the withdrawal from Saigon. But I get ahead of myself. In any case, I guess we wanted your experience as far as, like, do you feel as though the contracting world is only increasing or decreasing? Do you think that the global war on terror is the end of things, or do you think things are just speeding up?
So I think that contracting will only ever increase in size and scope for future conflicts. But, it's so directly correlated to America's war effort that the job pool rises and shrinks as America is in wars and as America is out of wars. The reason why I'm not currently contracting, because the plan was do that small security job, get a year of high threat time, get experience, and then go on to the program that I described previously, which was WIPS, Worldwide Protective Services. But when the war was drawing down, obviously, there's not as many American DoD and government personnel, which doesn't require as many contractors. So, personally, that's why I kind of got forced out from contracting. But I think that as everything continues, we're only going to see more and more parts of a war effort carved off to private security and private contracting, just because the American military is going to be hyper focused on fighting the war. So if it can lessen the load on itself by hiring outside people, it will. And when stuff like that happens again, the contracting jobs, you won't be able to swing a dead cat without hitting about 13 or 14 of them.
Dude, I mean, it's incredible to hear, because obviously you hear stuff from Ukraine and the contractors that are working under the auspices of the Ukrainian government in the Foreign Legion. I remember reading, especially this article of these ex-French Foreign Legionnaires who were contracted by the, I think it was the Omani government, who were officially conscripted into the military, their local military, so they technically weren't mercenaries. However, they were mercenaries, entire units of them, like Colombians, etc., and being used as like kill teams in Yemen. Now, I don't know how much you've heard personally about the experiences of people like in Ukraine, but I mean, I wanted your opinion on like Wagner Group and the way that they're kind of transitioning contractors into an offensive role.
Yeah, I know. There's essentially a world of difference between contracting for the American government and contracting almost anywhere else. America is hyper fixated on not even allowing the perception that they are hiring mercenaries. You could be hired on to do all sorts of things, but you are not allowed to fight, which is, for the people that are familiar with the 13 Hours story, that's why there was such a delay in letting those guys go, because you cannot send contractors to fight or retake buildings or objectives or shit like that. And then compared with the Wagner Group, which is practically part of the Russian government at this point, but that is quite specifically stood up to be its own private military that they can kind of plug in and plug out of areas either on their own or with the support of the Russian military, and they're allowed to go fight. They're allowed to go take objectives, do what they need to do, patrol, They did that a bunch in Syria, and so it largely depends on where you're contracting. And I know one of the rumors that always floated around when we would talk about doing that sort of stuff is we were always told that the American government is very quick to remove citizenship from guys that actually went and joined essentially foreign mercenary groups, because they did not like the perception of Americans going and fighting for money. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But that was always something that we were aware of as a possibility of happening if you wanted to go join like Wagner, because they put out an advertisement not too long ago. It's like $10,000 a month for Americans and Englishmen that fight on Wagner's side, which is really good money if you could get fucking paid what you're owed. But then you have to deal with how is America going to look at you when you come back with like $40,000 because you fought on the side of the Russians for 4 months in Ukraine,
Yeah, I'm sure that the FBI would be all inside of your butt. So yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because it's like, you read about Eric Prince, right? And like, it seems almost as though America would be the premier contracting force of the world, in an offensive capacity. And for whatever reason, it's holding it back. Now, I think that, this is my personal perception here. I feel like the increasing military tensions between us and this like emerging bloc of an alliance between Iran, Russia, and PRC is basically going to cause this rupture between 1990s like Carter America, peace, blah 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 bullshit, and this new America, which is increasingly becoming more imperialistic and like more foreign to its like actual citizenry, right? Its citizen body. And basically it's going to have to rely on foreign recruits into the military, but also mercenaries to actually do the dirty work for the the US government. So as far as like my experience is concerned, like I have known people that have gotten out and they've just how do you say, like there's a lot of qualified people that don't want to go into contracting because there's too many unknowns, and they don't know if, like, for instance, you read or hear about guys that get whacked and they get no money for their contract, you know what I mean? And it's like, you wonder what kind of security there is on the back end. Do they take care of you? What's the deal on that?
So a lot of that is from what we were able to see and from what I was able to see, it was the inherent risk of like starting up like brand new security companies, because I went, like I said, with medium to large, but it's probably at this point one of the largest contracting groups, and that was very official. You had health benefits, you had dental, vision, this, that, the other thing, taxes, all sorts of shit, just a proper company. But, all like the horror stories of, dudes being left out in the rain, dudes being, showing up at a place and there's no job, all of that seemed to come from new contracting companies that got stood up with, X amount of startup money and trying to hustle and make stuff work, and it all falls through. Because I did a little bit of contracting after Afghanistan, nothing crazy. In inside the United States, that's where that scene is very big. Everyone's got a buddy that's, we're starting up a company, we got this, and this, and everyone's just trying to get as much talent as they can, so that way they can bid for bigger and better contracts. And you have 12 guys starting out, good to go, all set, and then like one dude gets an offer, the other guy has a fucking kid, 2 dudes just drop off the face of the earth, and like the 5th guy's like actually addicted to like meth and no one knew it. So it's 100% a risk for like the smaller companies, and it's very easy for guys, and I saw this personally, where they just spend the money that they make hand over fist, you know, because it's a $1,500 rifle that's only like 7-8 days of work, and they have the mentality of, oh, I'm just working for this rifle. Then like they spend the money, they get the rifle, they can't even fucking use it because it's wherever they bought it, and they got to get it to their FFL, and you know they're somewhere else entirely, and it's like, oh well, you know, I really want a new phone, so that's like only like 4 days of work, and then at the end of the contract, at the end of the contract, you don't have any fucking money. So, so that's where a lot of that, like, you know, desperation comes from guys that just are not good financially at all, and they're always like chasing the newest job or the latest rumor and that sort of stuff.
Interesting. It's such an interesting like ecosystem because it's definitely a substrate of the military culture that you don't hear about a lot, about guys that like are, as you say, chasing, you know, the rumor mill, because there's no really official forum. Like, I mean, I guess you could, you know, I've like looked at Triple Canopy myself. I've looked at like a bunch of different places, and it seems like, yeah, they list job opportunities out front. However, it seems like you need a friend or like a reference to get you halfway through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is definitely what everyone seems to think. But you know, unless I'm walking proof that, you know, if you just have a decent resume, which was only ever 3 years in the infantry, no deployments with an honorable discharge, back then there were enough jobs to where you can kind of like work your way in. And that kind of leads myself to the other point, which was, and keep in mind, all this I have no idea anymore. I feel like, you know, the path that I'm about to describe isn't really available, just because you know, there's no war anymore. But
right.
You know, it was very common to get guys on that specific security job that I had, because we were just trying to build our resumes even more. You know, being able to say, listen, I spent 13 months on a I think it was like triple SA. I'm not sure, on a triple SA contract for JSOC. I have letters of recommendation from my shift lead and my site lead, and then being able to get onto stuff like whips, which was the big catch-all for everything. And contracts change hands, unfortunately. So, you know, you could wind up working for like 3 different contracting companies, even doing the same job. But you know, the level at which you kind of like needed a friend, that was a lot higher than the shit that I was on. Like, you might need a friend to walk on to, like, you know, an NSA security detail, or you're working for like the State Department with whips. But for the shit that I did, it was very easy. Just apply and do as you're told.
And it seems like it ebbs and flows like the market, right? So like at a certain point they can't get enough of you guys, and at another point, like, you have to be like the cat's pajamas to fucking do anything, right?
Yes, and that was even reflected in rates of compensation. And talking with other guys that were a lot further along in contracting with me. I didn't realize this, but apparently when you get to a certain level, and like the gear that they issue you now becomes something that guys seriously consider when they're going to take a job. Like Arc'teryx is this very high-end company that makes outdoor clothing. And they have a whole suite of clothing that's like military and law enforcement only. But if you really wanted to get people to sign on to your contract, you issue them Arc'teryx uniforms. So that's like, you get like 2 or 3 Arc'teryx uniforms, like with like 1 or 2 jackets, and that would be like a serious bonus, or like a serious good thing that guys would consider with, you know, on joining up on your contract. You know, per diem was also a huge thing that could be upped to get guys to join your contract. But, you know, like everything else, when there's a lot of jobs, not a lot of people, you got to scramble to recruit. But I joined when there were not a lot of jobs, a whole lot, and a decent amount of people. And as I stayed in, the amount of people was going up and the amount of jobs was fucking nosediving. So
as it happens. And so I guess just as a couple of final questions for you, I wanted your, I guess, military opinion on the things that are happening in Ukraine, as far as it like revolves around innovations and kind of like just the infantryman's perception of the evolution of warfare as it stands conventionally now.
Yeah, I think you can learn a lot of good lessons from Ukraine, and I think it's actually like a place to learn some really dog shit lessons. As always, artillery appears to be king. You know, our artillery it can shut shit down immediately. You know, drones are becoming incredibly prolific, and as far as I can tell, aside from kamikaze drones, it's all just regular drones off the shelves with a little bit of modifications. You know, that's going to lead to even more, you know, disbursement within individual formations, because, you know, why would you have a foxhole with 5 guys in it that, you know, a drone with a fucking grenade could take out when you could have a foxhole with 2 guys? And but I think the individual like infantry skills in the Ukrainians and the Russians leave a fuck ton to be desired. You know, watching videos, it literally just seems like a lot of these dudes are flying by like the seat of their fucking pants.
Yeah, I actually I was seeing that myself, as you know, I love my background is infantry myself, and like, you know, I see you can kind of see the patrolling, their habits, like small things that most people kind of don't pick up on, like for instance just doing it like a 360 spin at the end of a patrol, like seeing a guy like look back, make sure or whatever, like small things, like it's like they're not doing it. And it seems like the Russians are probably the most lackluster in this perspective. It seems like they're just putting, you know, dudes that are just dudes with rifles and our uniform on, and like be like, okay, you know, Vlad, go in that direction and like suss out the enemy positions, so that way the professional artillery corps can just annihilate them. That seems like what infantry is in their eyes, is just basically fodder and a fixing positional battle. Yes.
And on the other side, you know, I watched a video the other day here on the app that we're using, where very brave dude, a Ukrainian guy hopped out of the fucking trenches, was just walking along the tree line, a little bit in the tree line, got up to like 2 dudes that were like, you know, firing a machine gun further down the tree line, talked to them a little bit, and kind of crawled/walked up to this screaming, you know, Ukrainian dude like 20-30 feet away from the tree line, and, you know, tried to help him, and you know, that dude got shot. And I'm sitting there, I'm like there's fucking no low crawling, right? He's on his own. He doesn't have any fucking fire support or any sort of fire superiority. There's no smoke grenades. You know, there's nothing like that employed. You know, you watch on YouTube, you know, the guy that's blowing up on YouTube for posting all of his GoPro footage, right? Brave dude, right? Listen, he's, you know, hanging out underneath the fucking bridge, you know, 600 meters away from the Russian line, you know, soaking up artillery. But, you know, there's little communication. No one really knows what's going on from an infantry perspective. And you go watch another video where he's doing some covert patrol in like Russian held area, trying to figure out where everyone's at with 4 other dudes, and they're hanging out in a field, and, you know, they're running around in the village, and it's almost like it's just 2 professional militaries with a bunch of random guys acting as infantry, just like doing whatever the fuck they want.
No, I noticed that too, but I think it comes down, I think it's a little bit unfair on both sides, because there are significant logistical issues, which, like, America is able to do fire superiority because we have a significant industrial base backing us up. So like smoke grenades, all these things that we think are trivial are really, they have a huge back order of them, right? So they're dealing in a circumstance, in an environment where they don't have munitions and like all this kind of support equipment necessary to like do the necessary, you know, TTPs, right? And basically, you know, I kind of don't fault them for that, but what I do fault them for is what I hear is this idea that a lot of foreigners go to the Ukraine to fight and then they leave because the model under which the Ukrainians are fighting is like a Soviet model where the Soviets didn't allow much initiative on small unit leaders, like on even a company or battalion level. And you know that there are like a lot of them are you know, basically meat puppeted from way up in Moscow or Kiev, you know what I mean? And it seems like it's both ways, and people are frustrated because they can't take the initiative and win the battle. I mean, did you see that yourself?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I am always seeing reinforcements of the belief that the American military, specifically, I can't speak so much for the Western European countries, where the NCO Corps that the American military has is what makes or breaks winning engagements.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You know,
the Russians, you know, claim to have instituted a NCO program back in the early 2000s. I think might have been a little bit earlier, and all that was you know, their 4-year conscripts, like the smart ones in the 4th year were given like a little bit extra training. You know, China recently I believe recently introduced, you know, the idea of like, you know, the NCO, you know, but we're seeing, you know, a bunch of, you know, engagements where either, you know, no one can do anything because you're either attacking a fortified position, or, you know, it's a fluid fight and no one really knows what's going on because it's a bunch of essentially small fire teams all fighting on the same side, but they either have mutual support or they don't, and it's like herding cats, you know. when you know, for every time you know, when we go out on training, you know, NCOs are they got the busiest job in the world, ripping around, checking security, giving fire sectors of fire, you know, checking on fucking ammo, checking on dudes, you know, and making sure that, you know, that the fight goes well as can be. You know, then you sit there and you watch a video of a bunch of Ukrainians just like all looking in one direction, or like a bunch of Russians like all fucking huddled up together in one tiny fucking foxhole, you know, and knowing that, you know, if that was like a scenario in the U.S. Army, you know, there'd be NCOs like kicking people's asses to get them to disperse, or fucking grabbing dudes and throwing them into a 360 security fucking position.
Yeah, and just to like back on this for the audience, you know, on this transmission, like on previous ones, I've explained how the Russian model or the Soviet model is that in America there's the Instant Corps, which is deals with everyday tasks and stuff like that and discipline, and the officer is just basically the person that gives the mission and that sources outside support. Now, the repository of military knowledge in the West is dispersed, right? So if a fucking leader gets whacked, guess what? You know, you have a sergeant, staff sergeant, or even gunnery sergeant or sergeant first class in the Army taking control of that platoon and employing it gainfully. So you have a dispersion of what you call risk, right? But in Russia, that's not the case. So if you whack the lieutenant, he is both the repository of discipline and the military intelligence behind the whole thing, and everyone else is just like, what the fuck's going on? And what happens is that these big officers get whacked, right? And then you have a whole platoon, company, battalion completely lost. I don't know if you heard this, but a whole bunch of generals in the Russian army were whacked early on in the war of the counterattack for the Ukrainian counterattack. And I'm like, dude, that's why entire battalions are being captured or routed or destroyed, simply because of the fact that their leadership was paralyzed in this top-down, very like eggs in one basket approach to leadership. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that goes to reinforce the point that they don't have an active NCO corps. You know, even Russian generals are so used to having to lead damn near, if not in front, because the transfer of intent, right? This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it, is so poor that they needed to keep their thumbs on all of their units with as little dwell time as possible. Which works well, right? Up until you're fighting in the 21st century, and people who can launch cruise missiles and drone strikes and guided artillery strikes can look at the little computer screen, and the computer screen tells them, hey, I think there's a Russian command post in this location because I'm reading a bunch of radio transmissions that are abnormal for just a small unit, and the Russians fucking paid for it.
Sincerely, yeah, there's a lot of innovations going on, and I used to once upon a time work at the Marine Corps University, but there's a lot of innovations that are happening on the infantry side, which people are not taking into account due to like fourth generation warfare and like the increased capacities of UAS. However, I'll go back and just as a final note and just one last question. So Lance's Legion, this whole project, this whole ethos is about getting both veterans and individuals who have never been in the military to have a basic proficiency in military affairs, because that is the essence of what a citizen is, right? So to defend your rights, etc. I wanted you, an infantryman's opinion, whether or not, your average guy who's ever been in the military, never been in the military or whatever, can learn the basic skills necessary to ensure that he has his rights.
Absolutely. It is very easy to become proficient in how would you say this, in basic societal defense, right? A lot of the stuff in the military is framed and trained in such a way because you need to be able to interact with other things, right? Doing live fires with artillery and bombardments, watching officers incorporate, attack helicopters and all this, that, the other thing. It's all very complicated and very cool, but it's also currently not needed for the average person because it's outside of what they would have resource-wise. There are so many resources and groups and videos and social media pages dedicated to being prepared that at this point, if you have the ability to and you still do not, I feel like that should be a negative mark against you. Amen. It takes very little effort, energy, and resources to get a cheapo AR-15, right? Have some ammo, have some magazines, have a way of carrying it, and most importantly to me in regards to being a prepared citizen, have a month of food and water on hand. Yep. The ability for something crazy like this polar vortex the fucking Canadians sent us, right? To just like have that be on the horizon and go, you know what? I'm good. I can close and lock the door for 30 days and not have to worry about a thing. And we're seeing shit with, sabotages of power stations and all sorts of racial strife and political strife that, to me, if you're going to be a prepared citizen, if you're going to, advocate for yourself forcefully if needed, you're going to do a world of good just by being able to remove yourself from needing to have to go get food and water. I only have like 3 days of food in the fridge. I don't have any water. Just being able to be prepared like that is such an intrinsical part of being what I consider to be a good citizen. And it's not nearly as sexy as like room clearing and shit like that I feel like that's where most people should start. Go get a month of food and water before you do anything crazy.
I completely agree. And just to cap off what he said, a lot of guys don't understand the majority of military training is drill. And a lot of that drill, especially in the conventional military in the Army, Marine Corps, etc., has to do with coordinating supporting elements. But if you're a citizen like basically you're given the same equipment the Taliban was given. And look what the Taliban is now. They're successful. They won a war, right? And so all that you really need is basic infantry skills. And as you saw, the Taliban weren't really exceptionally good at it. They're just good at ambushing and patrolling in a way. And then second of all, having the will to fight. And third of all, having a little bit of preparation and some of your boys with you. And I think that's really all it takes. But that's going too far ahead of ourselves. I hope I have you again. This is American Militant. This is General Lance, and this is Lance's Legion signing off. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.